Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage. Oh, Buddy! Damn it! How I wished I could just send the Buddymeister away for 14 years.
I am Godmeister!
Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage.
And I'm Deniz, the Buddymeister.
And once a month we let all of our awesome patrons and YouTube members decide which movie we should review next.
The latest poll was all about director Bala. The options were Naan Kadavul, Nanda and Paradesi. And Naan Kadavul was the clear winner.
If you want to vote on the next movies, please consider becoming a patron or YouTube member as well. The newest poll is already up, and this time you can choose between the three Malayalam classics: Chidambaram, Elipatayam aka Red Trap, and Irakal.
Naan Kadavul, which means I Am God, is a 2009 Tamil language action drama that was written and directed by Bala. It is based on the Tamil novel Elam Ulagam, which means Seventh World, by J.R. Mohan, who also wrote the dialogue for the movie. It stars Arya and Pooja Umashankar in the leading roles and Rajendran and Krishnamurti in supporting roles.
Naan Kadavul is a really special film. It's unlike anything I have seen before. We have watched Bala's previous film Peter Magan a while ago, which I loved and you liked okay. And what I loved about that film was its unusual protagonist and the raw, untamed energy. But Naan Kadavul goes even further. It actually goes way further. Not only is our protagonist again someone who speaks only very few words, someone who lives at the edge of society and is just super bizarre, but it's not even really his story, as it is the story of all kinds of marginalized groups. Naan Kadavul leads us into the world of beggars, and it's a hellish and uncompromising world and depiction of such.
The movie features dozens of people who have real physical and mental disabilities. It features faces and bodies that are barely visible in our modern society anymore, let alone front and center as in a film like this. And I have to be totally honest here, it was tough for me to watch this movie, especially at the beginning. I haven't seen anything like it, and I wasn't prepared because I haven't read anything about Naan Kadavul before either.
There's one old movie that comes to mind that features people with disabilities similar to the ones we see in Naan Kadavul, and that's Todd Browning's 1932 horror drama Freaks, which I have also reviewed on the channel.
The world of Naan Kadavul is populated by misfits, and the movie does give them a voice and a representation. And you're of course totally on their side, as they are the pawns in the hands of the powerful.
Their story is intermingled with the story of Rudran, who was sent away for 14 years by his father because of some astrological bullshit reasons. Now the 14 years have passed, and repenting his act, the father wants to bring his son back home. But Rudran has become an Agori, an ascetic, who's able to identify good people and evil people, and who has the power to decide who's allowed to get salvation and who's not.
The Agori believe themselves to be divine. They call themselves God, hence the title of this movie. There's a lot to read and say about them, but we'll leave it at that for now. Like you said, we have two plot lines. The one with Rudran, who's coming back home but is still living in his own world because he's completely detached from his family and all earthly conditions. And we have the one with the misfits, who get pushed around but stick together like a family, especially when the character of the blind woman Hamsawali joins them.
Let me just say that I really wish that the two storylines would have mingled more. For the majority of the film it feels like two distinct movies. Of course at some point we assume that it will be Rudran who will act as kind of a savior or vengeance figure, but it really takes forever until we get there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always a bit torn when it comes to a long drawn out narrative like the one we have here. On one hand, I like a slow build-up that prepares us for a big and emotional finale. The best example for that would probably be Scorsese's Taxi Driver. But on the other hand, the build-up and the finale really need to work to be able to achieve this goal, or they can become a drag or be emotionally disappointing in the end.
Even with its raw nature and the world it depicts, Naan Kadavul was still lacking some punch for me. I think a lot of things could have been told a bit faster and more engaging. But what Bala created here is still something really special. It's raw, it's authentic, and it has this new Tamil cinema madness that you just have to love.
This mythical and mystical atmosphere that this movie radiates is fantastic. I love that right from the get-go, how we're introduced to the city of Kashi, also known as Banares or Varanasi. It draws you right in, and of course, when we learn about Rudran and the Agori, this massive mythical world opens up that I've never heard of. And Ilayaraja's great music obviously adds another layer on top of that.
There's a very heavy emphasis on music, which I really liked. Some good songs, but also a memorable background background score. And you're right with the atmosphere, it really sucks you in, and Arya does his best to fit the part. Rudran is a very out there character, and it's mainly Arya's great physical presence and crazy behavior that impresses, but it's a strong performance overall.
The yoga pose, the way he walks super aggressively, the growling.
And the great fighting technique and the altogether fascinating mix of chill/passiveness and exploding brutal momentum. Naan Kadavul has this wonderfully great archaic nature.
Absolutely, but it can also be funny, like when Rudran totally throws the cop with no repercussions whatsoever. And of course how everybody's scared to death to get cursed by him.
But apart from his great presence, this over-the-top craziness and this quite fascinating and liberating idea of being your own god, I didn't find the character all that interesting. It was certainly the first time I heard about a small group of the Agori, and the movie certainly explores some of their characteristics, mostly through the visuals, but as a real character, a real human being, he stayed somewhat superficial for me, and seemed more like the movie's strange X-factor.
I see what you mean, but that's pretty much exactly what I liked. That he's a character that's so hard to grasp, because he's not one of us anymore, you know? That he's this kind of otherworldly being who works completely autarkic and on his own terms. But let's talk about the other storyline, the world of the handicapped people and their ruthless masters.
The definite strong point of this movie is the community of these people. How they stick together, how they help each other, and how they make the best out of the little they've got. There are a few very memorable characters, like the man who has no arms and legs who gets worshipped like a god, or of course the small boy with the great laugh, who is taken away later because small people procure more money.
That's a crushing scene. Another character that stuck in my mind is the faceless man, who's in search of a blind woman because she's the only one who won't be able to see his face. It's really a cruel and graphic movie, definitely not for the faint-hearted.
Maybe it's somewhat of a defense mechanism, but the movie wasn't as heart-wrenching to me as it should have been. Some scenes were hard to stomach for sure, but I think the inhumane exploitation of these people by the movie's main villain Thandavan is just a little bit too open and drastic for me to really affect me more.
Really? I thought he was a great villain. Rajendran's menacing presence stole the show. I hated Thandavan. I wanted him to get what he deserved. I had my problems with the character of Murugan, who's supposed to be caught between a rock and a hard place, but that felt kind of forced to me. Thandavan, on the other hand, really got to me.
The climax, the fighting scene between Rudran and Thandavan, is awesome, although it kind of happens out of nowhere. But it's the wild and fierce duel you've been waiting for.
Yes, but it really does happen out of nowhere, doesn't it? I guess that's where I can see the problems that you had with these two characters. The nature of them and how they are developed almost doesn't allow us to be that emotionally involved.
Yes, but I'm sure there are also a lot of cultural things in the movie that went completely over our head, let alone all the religious motifs.
Definitely. I read a few articles about the movie and how you can analyze and interpret it. There's a lot in there, beginning with the idea that death can be a boon for people, and a general comparison between people who are completely dependent on each other or dependent on someone, and people who are completely independent from everything. And of course it's also interesting that an Agori is able to end the cycle of rebirth, which becomes so very important in the end. I really read a lot, but I still think I'm only on the surface of understanding anything.
All the stuff about salvation and the mimicking of gods like some of the beggars do. And of course the armless and legless god that doesn't speak. There's a lot to analyze. But you know what? I got the Rajnikant reference in the scene in the police station.
Yes, and I think the other two were Kishore Kumar and Dev Anand, but I'm not sure. That scene is really great though, and again, also crushing in the end, because that's when Hamsawali gets taken away. Pooja's performance is gut-wrenching.
I agree. So, what would we say in German about Naan Kadavul?
Das mystische Setting und die ebenso geheimnisvollen wie auch herzerwärmenden Charaktere, dieser raue Wahnsinn und die schlichte Kühnheit Balas machen Naan Kadavul zu einem sehr besonderen und sehenswerten Film.
I give Naan Kadavul 7 out of 10. It's more like 7.1, but I don't do that.
For me, it's 8 out of 10. It's more like 7.9, but I don't do that either. Spoiler trivia! Did you know that Naan Kadavul apparently had an alternate ending where Rudran is eating Hamsawali's corpse?
Didn't know that. So, what are your thoughts about Naan Kadavul? Leave a comment and hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd and also on Patreon, simply at the Jimmy Cage.
And you can hit me up on Twitter at the Buddymeister.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all we have to tell.
Jo, nochmal. Oh.